Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is I guess a US and indeed African politics addendum, kind of extra, where I'm going to reply to a couple of comments on a thread to a video I did and just set the record straight a little bit. I did a video on a very divisive topic, anything that deals with kind of race and ethnic division is going to be it's going to be interesting for the comments. But what I don't like, I've never liked, is people who straw man my arguments. So a straw man fallacy is to build up someone's argument into a mischaracterization of what it is, or a very weak version of what it is, and then burn it down. So you are actually burning down, or you are arguing against a kind of fake argument, not the real argument that is put forward. What you should do is steel man someone's argument, create the best version of it that you possibly can, and then see if you can still take it down. So I had a somewhat nuanced approach to the subject yesterday. What was the subject? Well, Donald Trump in the Oval Office, I think, ambushed Cyril Ramaphosa, the South African president, with an attack on him and his country for kind of allowing, perpetuating white genocide. And I said that this is a conspiracy theory that is not happening, as in it doesn't qualify for white genocide. And therefore, this is disinformation by Donald Trump. What I wasn't doing is making any comment about Cyril Ramaphosa, about how good he is as a president, other than I said he actually held himself with dignity in that meeting. That's all. That's the kind of only value judgment of him. So, why people think I'm kind of defending Cyril Ramaphosa or his politics, it's just beyond me. Like, I don't have the knowledge to make those judgments on him. I was talking about Trumpian disinformation, and that is why I prefaced the video with two examples, one from Caroline Levitt and one from Trump himself, about disinformation, where the White House is propagating false narratives. And this was another example of it. That was where I was leading up to, that this was disinformation, because I don't think that this qualifies as white genocide. Now, what I'm not doing is denying that there is any kind of racial violence in South Africa, or that white farmers aren't murdered because of their being white, at least on some occasions. The question is whether this is genocide, right? That's all. There are racially motivated murders in the UK every single year. White, brown and black people, I'm sure, are murdered due to the colour of their skin every single year in the UK. Does that mean that there is genocide in the UK? No, it doesn't. So, the question, all that really mattered here is whether this qualified as genocide or not. And perhaps I didn't go so far as to talk about formal definitions of genocide. But I was talking about how that, I think in the last year that I talked about, 49 white farmers had died, but then black farm workers died as well. You're not going to get black farm owners particularly commonly in South Africa due to apartheid laws that were enacted up until 1991, where black people couldn't own the land, so on and so forth. So you are going to have a proliferation of white people as farm owners across South Africa. And if you're going to have violence against farm owners, like violence against shopkeepers, violence against, car dealership owners, etc., you are going to get predominantly violence against white people if they are owning the farms. However, there's also violence against black people working on the farms. And in fact, what you're doing when you're looking at the data, quite often, if you are trying to propose a white genocide, is you're ignoring the black people that die on the farms, the black farm workers, and just concentrating on the white farm owners. Okay, so on and so forth. But really, the only question is whether this qualifies as genocide or not. And if it doesn't qualify as genocide, if that is essentially a bit of mythology, then you have a president using his platform to spread disinformation. That was my point. That's it. So let's just look at a couple of comments. So blacks being violent in South Africa and killing each other often doesn't mitigate that there's a party with membership in the millions where they chant for the death of white farmers and taking their land without compensation. So I didn't make any comments on whether there was whether there was genocidal rhetoric in some places in South Africa. I'm sure there is, right? My comment was whether there was actual genocide taking place, and indeed whether Cyril Ramaphosa was in some way culpable for it. Calling it an ambush to be shown this is an absurdity. No, it's not. It literally was like they had pre-prepared this stuff and then attacked him with it. And if that stuff was, well, whether it was disinformation or not, it's still an ambush. Even if there is white genocide, right? It's still a situation where they invited the leader of a country into the White House to talk about this and that, and then actually they had something pre-prepared that person wasn't expecting, and then they hit him with it. This was an ambush. So again, incorrect. Go and search on social media. Well, actually, this is somewhere where I'll be looking to get actual data. What members of the EFF say, or Malema, I don't know to whom this refers, and you'll see it's deliberate anti-white sentiment. Now, I'm not denying that there is anti-white sentiment in South Africa. So you are building up a straw man to my argument here. Imagine if millions of people in the USA were actively calling for the death of all blacks in the USA and had a significant representation in the House and Senate. Well, actually, is that a false analogy? Are there millions of people? And anyway, I wasn't making this argument, so it's kind of irrelevant. And as Cyril Ramaphosa said, that these were people that are saying this, horrible things, genocidal things, even like genocidal rhetoric, but it's not represented in the policies of the government of South Africa. Unsubscribed, incredibly mindless take on your part. Well, actually, I don't think it was incredibly mindless. And in fact, what I think is a very thin-skinned approach to having a conversation and disagreeing with each other. So, if you want to unsubscribe because I said something you disagree with, then I think that's a bit of a cop-out. Now, here's an interesting point here. I watch your channel daily. However, as a South African, I have to disagree with you on this one. What Trump showed, and thank you for the quote, for the comment, Peter Thiepen. What Trump showed was pretty accurate as to what is happening in our country. You should get in contact with South African farmers and hear their stories. Some of them will tell you horror stories. I knew a farmer whose child was put in an oven so the criminals could get the guns and money. Right. As I said below to him in the comment, is like, you have just made my argument. Like, that's literally my point. My point is that there is more complexity to just the simplicity of all white farmers that are killed because they are white. You've just then said, you're wrong on this one, and here's why you're wrong. I've spoken to South Africa. I know a South African farmer who had a child killed because they wanted his guns and money. Yes, my point is that many of those cases of farmers being killed will be over things other than ethnicity. Because the default for farm ownership is that they are white, and because farm owners have very large estates without the ease of protecting those estates, and they will have valuables on them and guns and all the things that people might want and vehicles, they are going to be susceptible to crime. But the question is that crime driven by socioeconomic status and wealth inequalities, or is it driven by it's because they're white? I'm stealing their gun and their valuables because they're white, or rather than I'm stealing their guns and valuables because I want guns and valuables. And by the way, it just so happens they're white. And by the way, I've also killed some black farm workers. That is absolutely crucial. So for this guy to criticize or to disagree with me, which is absolutely fine, and thank you for doing this in a way that's not, I'm going to unsubscribe, blah, blah, blah. But it says, please research more about this. But when you're making my point, literally my point in the opening salvo, then it kind of undermines a criticism. Trump was right here. Ramaphosa was a big lie. So most of the rest of this is just an attack on Ramaphosa, as if I was sitting here defending Ramaphosa. I wasn't. I know next to nothing about his leadership. So, yeah, again, it's important to understand what I am actually saying. And then Cyclone Knight here just goes off on one. if you want to know why right-wing populism is becoming popular, rewatch your own video here, but try to perceive the evidence as though you don't want to make endless excuses for black people. I'm not really talking about black people and white people. I'm talking about Trump's disinformation, his predilection for taking on conspiracy theories and disinformation. This could be about the moon landings. And it's kind of, my point is about that, is about his desire to spread falsities, right? It just so happens that this particular one is about white genocide, but I prefaced it with his lies about his poll numbers, his lies about the economy, his lies about the stock exchange, his lies about etc., and then went on to talk about the Epstein conspiracy theory that was promoted from Caroline Leavitt's predilection for right-wing influences in the White House press corps. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. So please do not misinterpret my position here. I'm not trying to sit there and excuse black people committing crime. It's just like, come on, guys, come on. You should be better than this. So, stop being delusional about the reality of white people suffering attacks and racism in South Africa because of historical grievance. That's not what he said. There is a historical grievance, but there is also unjustified, as in it's very difficult to justify racially motivated murder. I can explain it, right? And that's where you go to historical grievance. But please do not confuse explanation with justification. It's one of my pet peeves that I will seek to explain why things happen. It doesn't mean I say, and therefore it's good that happens. So, like, these comments really do get to me, some of them more than others. And yeah, I just want to first of all, very quickly, because I don't want this to be as long as yesterday's video, let's talk about the United Nations understanding of genocide. So, the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial or religious group as such, and that will include killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. Okay, so that is kind of how it's more, I guess, carefully defined. But genocide can also be committed against only part of a group as long as that part is identifiable and substantial. Now, the problem when you have any kind of law is you use terms that are themselves often vague. And in order to get an accurate understanding of the law, you have to then provide sub-clause and paragraph, and you keep getting more and more granular until laws are completely unworkable because they're so particular to any given situation. So you have these kind of rules of thumb. So it's substantial. What does substantial mean? So are enough white farmers being killed, but then also because of their ethnicity, because of their being white, and not because they've got guns and valuables and money and racial and social inequality and wealth inequality, but solely because they are white? Is that happening to a degree where it is substantial? And that's where we talked about the data, which is to suggest that actually, no, it doesn't look like it. When you look at 19,000 people getting murdered in a year and 49 of them are white farmers, then it's not looking like it's genocidal. Now, this is an excellent article by the Agence France-Presse. They do a fact check. False data distort complex picture of South African farm murders. And that's my point, is that it's a complex picture. There will be murders that are racially motivated. But is it a white genocide? There are murders in the UK that are racially motivated, but is there genocide in the UK? No. And you might find genocidal rhetoric, but genocidal rhetoric is different from actual genocide. And you may have individuals who commit racially motivated crimes using genocidal rhetoric. So person A commits a crime that would be included in the definition of genocide, but if it's just that one person doing it and they give you genocidal rhetoric, it doesn't mean that there's still genocide going on. They have committed to genocidal rhetoric and possibly to genocidal activity, but on their own, that does not constitute genocide. So how many of these incidents then constitute genocide? Well, that is a kind of, I always talk about the Socrates paradox, these fuzzy areas when you come to demarcation lines or delineation of not genocide, genocide. And that you have to test these things in court, and it's quite murky. But I would just punt to, this doesn't look like genocide. I don't think there's enough of a critical mass here, and the causality is not clear. That last point is very, very important. Anyway, this looks at the claims that many people are making, and to do with all that we went through yesterday, but then looks at the actual data and looks at both police data, but also farm organization data. So looking at both sides of the coin there, and neither of them suggest that there's genocide going on. And in fact, this does seem to be a strong correlation between the official police data or the official government data and what the farm organizations are saying. And that's both sides of the coin as well. It's also worth noting that some of the figures bandied by some of these claimants are wildly wrong and almost doubling the amount of white farm deaths. But anyway, I don't want to go down that route again. Like, this will be linked below. Go and check out this article. It is a good article that looks at the data. And remember, there are black farm workers killed as well, which kind of runs against the claims of genocide, right? Anyway, misrepresented figures. So while the claims are use exaggerated figures, farm murders and attacks in South Africa are undoubtedly reality. So farmers are attacked. White farmers are attacked. Black farm workers are attacked. What is going on? Quote, when you have 50 to 60 people, mainly Afrikaners, killed every year, with families murdered through acts of torture, you cannot ignore the problem. Absolutely, and I wasn't trying to ignore the problem, said Jean-Yves Camus, head of the Observatory of Political Radicalization at the Foundation for European Progressive Studies. However, Camus said it would be, quote, absurd to speak of, quote, a genocide against white people or white farmers, especially when compared to the total number of murders each year, more than 19,000 in the first 9 months of last year. Yet the topic is a recurring disinformation theme on social media. Using reverse search images, AFP Fact Check found many of the pictures used in the viral French posts came from their websites and started appearing in the early 2000s with testimonies from white South Africans about black people allegedly attacking them. False data was used then, as it is now, to perpetuate the idea of a white genocide, and then so on and so forth. So lots more to speak about there, but you've got to look at high crime rates. You've got to understand the causality that's going on there. And also, it's worth noting this, and this is another frustration. So when I'm talking about disinformation in the White House, he then uses data he uses that video, and it has some black people involved in political movements shouting genocidal rhetoric. Then he had a memorial that was a memorial, not burial site. So he claimed, A, that there's white genocide, B, that there were memorials. That there were burials. When they weren't burials, they were a memorial. And that's, I guess, less important, but it's still disinformation. He's still skewing the narrative. And then he presented a load of newspaper articles that supposedly showed white farmers being targeted in South Africa, except at least one of them was from the Democratic Republic of Congo. So again, that is outright disinformation. Now, for the president to be doing that, I could excuse that as sloppy if that was some guy down a pub showing me stuff on his phone. And then pointing out, oh, by the way, that one's not relevant. That is actually Democratic Republic of Congo. So that weakens your argument. And actually presenting that as data is disingenuous. And you need to be careful about that. But for the president to do that, when it should be fact checked by his aides around him and present that on international television in attacking a foreign leader, that is inexcusable, right? That is absolutely not good enough. So my point is that this was disinformation peddled by a disinformation merchant, and that seems to be correct. Trump claimed articles that showed that he showed were evidence of violent crimes against white farmers, but at least one of them was from the DRC. He claimed it was white genocide. I don't think it is. And he claimed the memorial site were burials, and they weren't burials. So you put all this together, and it was an ambush where he is presenting disinformation to the leader and making the leader look bad, and also presenting mistruths on international television. And I just think that's poor form. So yeah, I will stand by my videos yesterday. I haven't listened to it again, but I'm pretty sure I would have been careful not to tell you stuff that was unsupportable, such that there is no violence against farmers that's racially motivated, or that there isn't white genocidal rhetoric from black people in South Africa. I'm careful to just be talking about what Donald Trump was claiming yesterday, and I think what he was claiming was disinformation. Please correct me if you think I'm wrong, but please do not build up arguments of what I said that were mischaracterizations of my position. Thank you.